Here I have two more decks from the mixed legacy virtual card era, so that's 2014 and before, and the post-2014 reset era. If you're interested in knowing more about why it's strange to mix these two formats together, there's a lengthy description in the description of this video, so you can read that. I'm going to start out with a bombing run deck. This is a dark side deck, trying to have TIE bombers go down to sites and obliterate rebel scum or whoever else gets in the way. So the starting system, Kuat system, along with the You Cannot Hide Forever. So this actually allows me to go get this system, Wakilmui. I don't really know how to say that. I've never actually heard it said. But these are the other effects. So this lets me deploy battleground systems. And this is the big one in the decks. When you draw a TIE bomber for Battle Destiny or Weapon Destiny, you can add up to 5 to the Destiny. That's going to be important later. It's not adding 5. You can add any number from 1 to 5 up to it. And you can also add 1 to Proton Bomb Weapon Destiny draws. So lots of options there for getting Destinies exactly how you want them. Usually in Star Wars you want to draw higher than a certain amount, but this deck that's not always the case. Bombing runs, of course. That one with an interesting printer error on it. So I should go back to bombing run. This is a mobile effect. There's not too many of these, but it basically allows your bombers to go down to those sites. So whatever site this is at, your bombers can leave orbit and go down to the site to battle and bomb and then go back up. And this deck was made before we had shields, so there is a shield now. Before my friend and I played shields, I should say. So there is a shield nowadays that protects one site from proton bombs, so that could be a big deal for the light side. But just trying to go down and overpower them with ties at sites, when most of the time their weapons can't hit starfighters, was the idea here. So a bunch of different TIE bombers, and here's the bombs. So you can collapse interior sites, which basically kills everyone in there and removes all the force icons, I believe. Or you can fire in a bombing run battle and you draw Destiny. Everything with that Destiny number is lost. And I'm fairly sure that there was a errata to make, it's been a while since I played this deck, to make TIE bombers and their pilots immune. So it's not like you're going to, if I have my TIE bomber pilot, he's not going to bomb himself right out of the bomber. That's why that initial effect is so important, because with that initial effect, you can add up to 5. So if you draw a 2 and you want to hit a bunch of guys that are Destiny 3, you can add 1 to it if you want. But that's only if you draw a TIE bomber, but there's plenty of TIE bombers in the deck. So that's why a 0 Destiny isn't too bad, actually, because you can make that a 5 if you want. Concussion missiles to take out targets in space, along with the intruder missile to get a capital ship. And then when somebody fires a weapon, they're power +3, and I can redraw weapon destinies. The character one doesn't affect too much, but weapons making my guys more powerful and being able to redraw is pretty nice. Some dreadnoughts to ferry my ties around if I need to. Plus they make my ties more powerful in space. A TIE squadron. A couple of admirals I put in here. This is the dreadnought Thrawn. He doesn't really exist anymore. So here's the system that I can pull with that initial effect, You Cannot Hide Forever. 2 copies of this to allow me to retrieve when I deploy ties. And I guess there's 2 copies there of inconsequential losses. So, oh, nope, I was thinking of another deck. So yeah, planetary subjugation. So it's nice to get inconsequential losses out to be able to forfeit my weapons. But if I do lose my weapons, that's the idea of firepower here. To be able to not necessarily retrieve, but deploy from lost pile. So it's basically retrieval, except it has to go to the table. And then I'm not sure if I was rebuilding this deck in this day if I would include these, but the idea was if I'm bombing somewhere, there's a good chance my opponent's draining me for a bunch. So trying to get these into my hand, and if there's If I lost 3 force to a force drain, I deploy this. Opponent loses 2 force. If they drain me again, I deploy the second one, and they lose 4 force. So kind of trying to stop them from doing big drains. The systems I chose for this deck, the idea behind these was to pick systems that I thought that the light side would probably have sights at. So depending on what deck they're playing, it might be difficult to anticipate which systems and sites those would be. But if I don't have a system where they have sites, or if their sites don't have the matching system on table, I can't really get my bombers there. So just trying to guess the most common ones they would have. So it's kind of risky. Otherwise, I basically have to turn it into a space deck if they have no way for me to actually go down and bomb them. And some helpful tie effects, or interrupts, I should say. Pulling non-unique ties into hands, that's nice to put a 5 back in the deck and to get a tie out of my deck. And then Imperial Command to go get those admirals. But lots of decent destinies in here. It's pretty contingent on being able to get bombers to the opponent's sites, but if you can, it's a lot of fun to basically send down guys on a bombing run and they can't do much about it. They can overpower you, but with power plus 2 immune to attrition tie bombers who are power plus 2 or 3 during a bombing run battle, and then also adding 3 to their power when they fire a weapon, you're probably not going to get overpowered. So that's the dark side deck, bombing runs. This one is quite different from the mostly space decks that I had otherwise, although there is plenty of space in here too. This is a Senate deck, so trying to control the Galactic Senate. Each senator has a bonus when you're in a Senate majority, which basically means you have more politics there than the other person. Politics is like power, but at the Senate, it's kind of a complicated objective now that I think about it. But once you have a couple senators at the Senate, you can flip it. With shields, this isn't so useful anymore to be able to use 3 force to place 2 cards from opponent's hand into their use pile. There's now a shield where as long as your opponent has less than 13 cards, you can't take cards away from them. But adding destiny to your senators is nice, and the more useful thing is the bonuses that the senators themselves get. So you deploy Galactic Senate in any other location. This is the other location I chose because it allows you to get Boss Nass out. My starting effects here. You reveal a starship to go get its pilot, or vice versa, so it's a nice way to get matching pilots aboard their ships. This lets me deploy systems and draw a card when I force drain a battleground system. And then I can get out docking bays with this, plus if my opponent decides to battle me at the Senate, I'll have higher forfeit senators to hopefully soak some of that damage. But battling at the Senate is usually unwise depending on the combos the opponent has, just because Weapon Destiny draws are -6. Unless you're a Republic character, your game text is canceled. So he's key to the activation here. His chambers allow me to deploy him. He can go get this guy, who then allows me to deploy this. But the other thing he says is, while Boss Nass is at his chambers, your generation here is +1 for each Gungan present. So I'm basically getting 5 force from those 4 cards. Not a super great ratio, but it's 0 for the opponent, so 5-0. She's key to the deck. In a Senate majority, retrieve 1 force for each Naboo site I control. So eventually I like to spread out to those 2 Naboo sites, and Boss Nass and Rep Bean. It's kind of risky to have them at separate sites, so sometimes I have other characters there too. But those 2 guys basically helping me retrieve 2 force per turn. It is expensive for the opponent to deploy there. Cards with ability to deploy +4, and Boss Nass makes it so that I at least draw Battle Destiny. But it could get ugly, depending on how much force they save. So each senator has their own bonus. He basically steals Battle Destinies. It's not quite that good, but he's just a nice card to have in there in terms of his flexibility. I can deploy a senator using Boss Nass's text there to Naboo, or I can deploy him, I should say to the Senate, or I could deploy him to Naboo if I'm anticipating getting ambushed there. I got a couple copies of him because since he has an order agenda, he's Destiny +3 when he's in my deck after I flip. And his bonus isn't bad. limit the opponent to 1 battle destiny. Him, I don't know if I need 2 copies of him in here, just because being able to... I hope I'm not in a point where drawing 4 cards for my hand is something I need to do. So that leaves some flexibility if I get rid of him. He's another key to the deck. Whenever you force drain a battleground system, you can retrieve a force. So the idea here is just do a little bit of damage, but a lot of retrieval. This lets me pull senators. This lets me take senators that have been deployed and take them into my hand. So that's more useful when there's political effects, which I decided to get rid of after I updated this deck for shields. I don't know if I need 3 copies in there. And then a bunch of matching ships and pilots to try to control space. So it's always good to have Luke for the retrieval, Poe and his starfighter for the extra battle destiny, the Falcon and Rey. I just like her used pile pull. And then some Naboo guys, because I have Naboo as a system in here too. And I believe Queen Amidala's text is for each Naboo... Oh, it says for each Naboo site you control. I might have thought it was location. I think there's a dark side guy that does for each Naboo location. Some EPP characters if I want to battle on the ground. Clones, because I got Ayla Secura in there. And then the systems I deploy: Naboo, Jakku, and Nar Shaddaa. And then a spaceport docking bay. This one is kind of a risky one, because if opponent has no escape, they can really hurt you there. So I might change that out for something else. Don't know if I necessarily want to do Naboo, because if I do Naboo, then Boss Nass's ability doesn't work if I have non-Gungans on Naboo. If I did that, I'd probably have to put Tarpals in the deck to prevent opponent from moving to underwater sites. So that's a good card at a docking bay. This helps me pull cards into my hand, and then to get starfighters or to have their maneuver be my battle destiny. So a minimal damage deck, but just trying to do a bunch of retrieval. This one isn't that far off from being a viable deck in the post-reset era. Viable in terms of being legal, I'm not sure if it'd be good, but this is one that I might actually update for the post-reset era. There's probably only 6 or 7 cards I would need to take out, and then probably 4 or 5 more on top of that I'd want to take out to maybe make it a bit more diversified and ready for some land combat if necessary. But I do like the Senate decks. I kind of like the idea of having your politicians doing their tricks in the Senate, and then you're out battling and trying to do other things there. So that was 2 more decks. I'm probably about a third of the way through the Legacy and Reset decks that I have, the mixed era decks. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you tune in for subsequent ones. Thanks again.